Have you ever secretly dreamed of writing a book one day? Or maybe you just crave a good story that makes you feel seen in midlife with all its challenges and changes and surprising chances for reinvention. Today's guest proves that it's never too late to start something bold. Gretchen Anthony published her first novel at age 48, and her latest, Tired Ladies Take a Stand, is striking a chord with women everywhere who are tired of being everything to everyone, and they're ready to claim their own space. So, if you've ever wondered how to balance your dreams with life's demands, or how to spark creativity when you feel stuck, this episode is going to inspire you to think differently about what's possible in midlife. So, welcome to episode number 34 of the Midlife Reset Podcast. I'm Cheryl Gordon. I'm a yoga and mindfulness coach to midlife women who would like to feel stronger and lighter and more energized. So, welcome, Gretchen. I'm so thrilled that you could zoom in. Please give us a little background. What did you do before you were 48 years old?
Thank you for having me. Well, I did a little bit of everything, which um, I think so many of us do. I was busy raising three boys, and um, I had a career in corporate communication, and had for 20 some years, and had juggled between full time and taking on contracts. And my husband had a big career, and so we moved a few different places, and so really I was trying to do the balance that so many of us try to do, which is yeah, fulfill daily responsibilities while also seeking to do what fills our hearts, at the time, whatever energy we have left to find that
When the
stuff.
kids were all growing up, you have three kids.
Hmm.
Yeah, so when the kids were all growing up, I guess there wasn't a lot left over, but now the last one is just off to college.
Just off to college. Yep,
Yeah.
yep. Yeah,
So
we spent the weekend with him, and that lifts your heart. Yeah.
yeah. It is hard though, isn't it? Like I know when my boys moved out, I was embarrassed to admit to empty nest syndrome. I thought that was like, old people, who didn't have much else in their lives. But, I think you're always a mom and you always worry about them. And there is a little bit of adjustment there, isn't there?
There is a lot of adjustment. I had a similar reaction to you. I'd had women who were pivotal, or close to me in life say something along the lines of, I don't know what to do with myself now, or I don't know who I am now. And I always
Yeah.
thought, oh, that's really sad. And part of what I was doing in those, you know, the latter half of those 20 years, or, of before writing my novel, was trying to figure out, okay, what is next for me? Because these guys are going to fly someday if I've done my job right.
Yeah, on one
But
hand, we really are happy that they're flying and that they're
yeah.
thriving, but boy, we would like to have a more day-to-day contact with that. But oh well.
Oh well, yeah, but then the sorrow, I get the sorrow now because that chapter of your life is completed.
Yeah, and it was
And
such a big one,
yeah,
right? Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And that's a lot what we talk about on the Midlife podcast is this sense of, I mean, I've actually been an empty nester longer than I had my kids at home, believe it or not.
Oh, oh wow.
Yeah, because my kids both moved out at 18, never came back, went off and did their own thing. So I'm very, very proud of them, of course.
Of
But
course.
I'm still kind of longing for those days when I had like everybody
Yeah.
underfoot and the kids coming and going and the friends coming and going. Anyway, let's get back to, did you always know you were going to write a book one day, or did you just wake up one morning and have this crazy idea?
No. Well, I have a I had a sense, like a lot of people do, where I just always felt like I had a book in me.
Mm,
And yet it was not, as I was looking at my career, as I was, in school and preparing for what my professional chapter might be, I ha- I sensed, seemed to understand that I needed more security for myself at that time in my life than what fiction or writing as a career would bring me. And so that's why I pursued, I was in I had a great job. I was in management consulting, I was in corporate communication, and that was good because that fulfilled a need for me. But I always did deep down have an a need, a desire that I hadn't tapped yet, which was I do have these stories in me. I do have these characters brewing. And in the case of my characters, the older I got, the more they started talking to me in my head and demanding to be heard. And that's really what turned into the books.
That is so
Is Yeah, yeah.
cool.
The character, the matriarch in my debut novel, which was called Evergreen Tidings from the Baumgartners, she was with me for probably 5 to 7 years before I finally, wrote or published the book because I kept hearing her voice. And eventually I was like, okay, this woman is probably gonna, you know, she's never gonna get out of my head unless I write a book about her. So yeah, that's how it came about for me. And I was in the midst of a career transition. And even though transitions are so hard for us, especially career transitions, I was lucky enough to be able to see this window of opportunity to pivot. And I had a career coach at the time who said, if you've always had this book, maybe this is your next chapter.
Mhm.
So,
No
yeah.
pun intended.
No pun intended. In fact, he was looking at my resume and I had just been laid off from my corporate career, which is hard, but I sort of sensed it was right. And I was looking at, my next step and nothing called to me. But I showed him my resume and I said, I feel like I'm all over on my resume. And he was a job coach and he looked at it and he said, actually, I think when I look at your resume, it reads to me in chapters. You had a chapter where you did this, you had a chapter where you did that. And I said, "Oh, well, funny you should say that because I felt like I feel like I I'm I'm not going to be settled unless I publish a book at some time in my life." And he said, "Well, funny you should say that because it seems like now's your time."
And that was when you were 48, because so many people do face a big career change at that time, especially with our uncertain economy the way it is now.
Yeah.
So it's really nice to hear those stories of people that have those dreams, you know? So
Hmm.
so you had the characters actually living in your heart and in your head. They were just looking for you to give them a voice. That the
Yeah.
secret to your creativity?
I think for me, the best characters have the best characters that I've ever written are the ones who have lived with me. The ones that I try to force or the ones that I try to conjure are less authentic, they're less compelling. And I think there's a little bit of woo in that, but I also think that the biggest part, I like to say that what makes us writers unique is that our biggest skill is listening. If we really are good at listening to conversations and to the way people talk and what they talk about, then we steal those little things and they inform our characters and they inform the way we tell our stories. And so that's why I think the most compelling characters are the ones who have been living in my head for a while because it means that I've been listening to them, I've been absorbing them, they've been, informed by real things that have happened to me in my life or real people that I've known.
Right.
So
Now, your latest book, which I have right here, it's a bit autobiographical, isn't it?
it is. Yeah.
Talk about
So
living with
tired.
your characters.
Yeah, talk about living with my characters. Tired Ladies Take a Stand is about the tagline in it is something about like you've heard about the year of saying yes, well here's the year of saying no, and it's about four friends at two different phases in their lives, one in their late 20s when they all meet and they are starting in their professional lives in San Francisco, and they by circumstance tend meet each other and become fast friends, and they have this year where they've all broken up with bad boyfriends and they say we're essentially at the most exciting time of our lives. Let's say yes to everything and make it a big year for ourselves. And they do. And that becomes like a philosophy. And their friendship continues and it becomes a philosophy for them in life. Well, then you cut to the other narrative when they're in their late 40s and early 50s. And they realize just how toxic It can be to say yes to everything and how much it's weighted them down in their lives. And they come to a point where they have to begin to say no. And when we're not used to saying no, and those who love us are not used to us saying no, mayhem often ensues because we don't know how to do it. We're not skilled at it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and the book itself, even though it's fictional, it is loosely autobiographical because it's based on my dear friends and I at that time in our lives in San Francisco, which is when we all did meet. We were all breaking up with bad boyfriends. We were all getting our careers under us, and we did. We had this year where we said, "We're going to go for it. Let's just go." We're all
Yeah.
single. We all, have a little bit of money to spend and our weekends free. And we did. We called it Kiss Fest. We decided we were just gonna, not get tied down and just have fun. And we did. And it's something that we still reflect on all the time. And we each of us thinks that spirit of adventure shaped our lives in good ways.
Yeah. But I love how you bring it around to older women now, because a lot of us do have those memories from when we were a lot young. Maybe we didn't have a year of saying yes or a kiss fest. I thought you were going to say something else, but but
We didn't go that far.
I always say, oh, that was 30 years ago, that was 40 years
Mhm.
ago, that sort of thing. So it's nice to see that you can write a novel about mature women and still make it every bit as compelling and every bit as, fun to read as it is when we're reading about 20 somethings.
Well, that's one of the things I discovered about this book, while I was writing it, is that it forced me to step outside myself a little bit and evaluate this time in life from a different perspective than my own. Because even though your your books may be based on things that happened to you or that people that you knew, they still are fictional, and you still have to make them into fully rounded characters. And they can't be just mimeographs. They can't be just copies of people that you meet in life. And that really forces a lot of reflection and introspection. And even that was the hardest thing about writing this book, and for me, was separating the character who was based on my friend from the actual friend. And long way of saying, in that process, I had to look at each of us from many different perspectives. How is this person different than she may have been when she was in her 20s? What led to that? Is it serving her now? Is it not serving her? And how does that, what's that spectrum?
Hmm.
And it was interesting. And then in the process also, I recognized how few books really feature midlife heroines.
Yeah.
A-
Yeah.
and we, now that we're in midlife, we recognize that this is a gigantic phase of life. We have so many more opportunities in front of us, so many more freedoms, so much more flexibility, and yet different challenges than we had when we were younger. So this is no less robust a period of our lives in our 20s were. There are no fewer questions, but we approach them differently. We have a different perspective on them. And
Mhm.
so, yeah, so that was um, that was an unexpected surprise for me in writing this book.
When you're talking about basing characters, say, on your friendships, even though you might be the closest of friends, you still don't know how they actually feel or what they're actually saying to themselves in their heads as they go through these
Right.
different situations. So that's where the creativity comes in, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And we never fully know what's going on in anybody else's head. And I had to have conversations with my real friends and say, okay, look, I know you're going to recognize this character. You're going to see yourself in this character, but they do dumb things. They're going to, you might
Yeah,
hate things about this character, and it doesn't mean that I see that in you. You have to
I just have to flush it out.
remember. But
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So I don't want to give away too much from the book because I know our listeners will want to read about this journey for themselves. Now, was I correct in assuming that you were Fern in the book?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
I was the inspiration for Fern.
I've never been very good at English and analysis and stuff, and I was really nervous having an actual author on. I thought, oh my goodness. So one of the things that I thought would be fun to talk about, and like I said, I don't want to give a lot away, but Fern has a decision to make in the book. She has a really exciting career opportunity. but it may make some of her friends uncomfortable. It's an amazing business deal, but it means detouring away from what her friends expect from her. And this kind of goes back to what we were talking about, the year of saying no, I think. She
Yeah.
had to stand up for herself. Now, so many midlife women are in this situation. It might not be exactly the same as Fern in the story, but maybe we have to put our foot down with adult children and tell them it's time for them to move on. We want to be empty nesters.
Yeah.
Maybe we have to put our foot down with our husbands if they've had like all the, we've moved for their career and all that kind of stuff. Maybe we want to start a business or we want to go back to work and we need to make our career the priority for a change. All different kinds of things. A lot of us have aging parents, and we have a lot of responsibilities coming from that, and we may have to
Hmm.
not make everybody happy with our decisions. So, what have we learned from Fern, do you think, about how to say no?
Well, what I think Fern learned was, uh, and I still recognize myself doing this, or maybe being drawn to do this, was that she wasn't truthful.
Mm,
First of all, with herself, and about what she really needed and what she really wanted, and in return, then she wasn't truthful with the people that she loved, and so she approached the business choice. It's not so much of a giveaway to tell people this. So she had written a book um that was actually a book of essays about her friends when they were young, and it was picked up years after its publication, and she was offered the chance to have it made into a film. And her friends, she had not gotten permission from them to write the book in the first place. I did. I see, that was different, but I did. My friends were all on board. But they don't want her to put their lives in. They hadn't given permission to put them in the book. They certainly don't want them on the screen, and she goes ahead with it anyway because she's convinced that because this is her career goal and it's something that she's wanted all along. She's convinced that they will eventually see that and come along with it. And I think what is so hard as we get older, in creating new boundaries for ourselves, is that we've put ourselves second for so long that when we finally have this chance, um, maybe to put ourselves first or whatever, we make decisions that don't reflect our values. um because sometimes when we make if we've been sacrificing for so long, then when it's like when you're on a diet, and
yeah,
you've been like cutting out carbs for 4 months and not eating anything, and then all of a sudden it's your birthday and you
yeah,
say, well, it's my birthday, I'm going to have a piece of cake. Well, then you have pieces of cake, and then you have pizza the next day because you've been starving yourself. And I
exactly.
think that's the point that in particular Fern learned, and that I'm trying to learn in my life, is that, okay, just because I was starving myself doesn't mean I want to live by different values now, but it also doesn't mean that I want to con- continue to make sacrifices that aren't necessarily good for me in the long run. So how can I strike that balance? How can I have meaningful conversations with the people it might affect now, and still stand up for myself?
Yeah,
Because it can be uncomfortable for us to say, I know this isn't necessarily part of the agreement that we've lived by all these years, but it feels right for me now. So how can you come along on this journey with me, or
yeah.
what
Well,
have you?
it's a great story. And I do think you make such a wonderful point about if we live our lives depriving ourselves or deliberately sublimating our dreams and goals so everyone else can be happy, then there's a certain level of resentment. And I do talk about that a lot in my programming around mindful eating because that's what happens when
Yeah.
you cut out carbs or when you try to have extra good willpower. You just
Yeah.
rebellion eat or you binge eat.
Yeah.
And I think so many women have sacrificed for their families and for their career mates for such a long time. Before we go, I really want to make sure we talk about what's coming up next for you. So in January, you started the Middle Book Club. I think this is
I
so
did.
amazing.
Thank you. Well, this grew out of this realization that I had when I was writing and then marketing Tired Ladies Take a Stand, and that is the realization that um, I used to I like to say that if you sort of just took a look at our contemporary literature, you would wonder if every woman disappeared somewhere by the age of 40, because we write about women who are, coming of age. We write about romance, their first romances, but then suddenly everything seems to get settled when we get married and have children, and then we fade off, and then we reappear in literature around the age of 75. I like to call it the Miss Marple effect, when old women get quirky and interesting again.
Oh, that's hilarious.
And so I said that, I know my book is not the only one out there. And I know that women like me, I had had such a response by readers saying it was so great to read about characters who are my age and going through the things I've got a mom who's calling me now just as much as my daughter is, or my kids are. And we're the sandwich generation, all that stuff. We all know what's going on. And so in the middle, I started an online book club. It's on Substack. You can find it at themiddlebookclub.com. And we read books every month. We choose a title, and it's exclusively heroines who are, I like to call us in the juicy middle of life, because I think this middle part of life is real juicy. It's ripe with, so many things
Yeah,
going on.
yeah,
Yeah. So,
yeah.
like this month, for example, for October, we're reading The Change by Kirsten Miller, which was just a gigantic hit. But it's about these three women who are in their 40s and 50s who discover that there's a serial killer there's a man, or there's someone been killing women on the shores of Long Island, and the crimes are being ignored. And they all discover powers. It's a little bit supernatural. They all have come into their powers, and they take it into their hands to get justice for these girls. And it's so every month it's like we're discovering heroines who are facing things similar to what we're facing, and then we get to talk about it because we're all peers
Yeah.
in the group.
And that's the real joy of a book club. And I don't mean the kind of book club that's just a cover for drinking wine and escaping your husband. I mean, like an actual book club where you talk about the book. It's so much fun with like-minded people.
It
Another
is.
wonderful way to be a lifetime learner is through travel. And Gretchen, you have an amazing idea for travel group.
Thank you. Yes. So I am working on, it's not out yet, but I am putting together my next chapter. Even though, we can have multiple chapters going at once, right?
Absolutely.
My next venture is to add on to the Middle Book Club and the books that I'm writing with, now that my husband and I have so much more free time and I have the flexibility to be on the road while I work. I am starting a new newsletter called Bookish Travel, and it is ways that you can turn every trip that you take, every adventure that you take, into a literary adventure. So if you're going to be in Dublin, for example, what are the literary things you can do in Dublin? We just happened to have taken our 25th anniversary trip to Ireland. So I'm fresh with
Congratulations.
ideas out of that. Yeah. Because literary tourism is becoming a huge thing. People want to, when we love these books and stories that we've heard, we want to find the places that
Oh,
inspired
yeah.
them, or,
Oh,
and
yeah.
and I want to, at this phase of my life, now that I have the time and the opportunity to travel, I want to take advantage of that. So I'm turning that into my next venture.
It
So
sounds
look
amazing.
for
And
that soon.
we'll all have to sign up for the book club so we can get information when the travel comes out.
Yes,
Oh
yes.
man. So many of us women have those travel dreams, but we can be limited by what we
Mhm.
feel safe doing because of our physical abilities, or maybe we put off our dreams because, somebody might need us and their lives have
Yeah.
always been prioritized. But I bet you'll agree, my listener, that with Gretchen and I, that tired ladies need to take a stand to get out there in the world and experience the great book locations Gretchen has scouted and immerse yourself in the unmatchable lifelong learning that we all deserve. What do you think, girlfriend, might be holding you back from taking a stand? Is it sleepless nights, brain fog, worry over sore joints, or extra weight? You should check out my masterclass, the 5-step midlife reset. It's free on my website. Discover simple practices that will take you from teary, tubby, and tired to strong, happy, and energized. You'll feel like a heroine in your own life story. And maybe Gretchen will do a novel on us. Thanks so much, Gretchen, for sharing your time and your wisdom with us today. I'm still a little starstruck at interviewing a real author.
Thank
Namaste.
you for having me. Namaste.
Hey, girlfriend, I'm so glad that you're listening to this podcast. But I wonder if you wanted to take the work a bit deeper. Would you like to feel lighter, sleep better, and wake up energized again? Join my 60-minute free masterclass to learn the 5 steps that help me lose 25 pounds, reset my body, and finally feel calm, strong, and confident again. You can register on my website, and I really hope to see you soon.